to start this meeting. Do I need to use it? Hey, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Salt Lake City Planning Commission on July 9th, 2025. It's just after 5:34. Please note the public meeting rules, which are posted just outside this room, or they're in Section D of the Planning Commission Policies and Procedures. If you've submitted comments to a planner or to a community organization prior to this meeting, we have those, and they're in the public record. If you want to make a comment this evening, please fill out a comment card, which are available on the desk right outside, and give it to somebody. And if you want to make email comment, you can send an email to planning.commission@slc.gov. The first thing we're going to do is roll call.
Amy Burrows.
Here.
Amy Barrett.
Here.
Brian Scott.
Here.
Jeff Barrett. Okay. Lila Rosenfield.
Here.
Mike Christensen.
Here.
Mike Villa.
Here.
Richard Leverett.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 7 commissioners here, which is a quorum. The report of the chair, I don't have anything to report, and the vice chair isn't here today, so now it's report of planning director.
Sorry, I'm trying to get a document open. So we actually have quite a bit of big things to update you on. First is, you may recall that when the city was working on the North Point plan, there was also a companion annexation that was happening for some land. A good chunk of it is city-owned land that was not within the city boundaries. That annexation was finalized by the Lieutenant Governor's office last week, and so that is officially now technically part of the city. So it's probably, I don't know, 1,600 acres of land out in the North Point area that's now part of Salt Lake City. Second is also a huge thing is last night the city council adopted the MU zoning consolidation that came through this commission last fall. They made a number of changes over it since they started their first briefings on this back in April or May, I think. So some of those things that they did is, I'm going to start with a couple of legislative intents. So legislative intent is essentially how the council initiates a code change or like a modification to our general plans. So first off is that they initiated a legislative intent for us to update the central community plan along the State Street corridor. So that's something that we'll start as soon as we have the capacity to do so. Their intent there was to essentially upzone where appropriate along the State Street corridor. So that's basically, doesn't include the downtown area, but it's south of 900 South to 2100 South, which is the southern city border. They also initiated a legislative intent to look at standards for new construction and major additions in local historic districts to address where there's setbacks and upper level stepbacks when 2 different zones are adjacent to each other of different heights. So that mostly involves the Historic Landmarks Commission, but obviously the Planning Commission's obligated to make and required to make a recommendation on that, so you'll be involved in that as well. And then the final thing that they reviewed, or that they did a legislative intent on, was some parking regulations focused mostly on what happens when on-street parking is removed because of fire access for new development. So that's going to be a fairly complicated thing. It also includes looking at parking standards for when buildings are all micro units and things like that. So those things will start working. Like I said, we'll start working on those as we get closer. They also made some other general changes to that consolidation. So the first group I'm going to talk about is in the Sugar House area. So from 2100 South to I-80 and from 13th East to, I think it was McClellan. They increased the height in that area. I think they went up to 150 feet. The rest of that zone is 125 feet. They also upzoned a couple of properties in the Sugar House Business District from what was a combination of MU5 and MU6 to MU8. That's the former Snell Grove site. And then the properties directly across the street from there where the vacant Midas, the old car wash that's now a vacant property, sits, up to the Intermountain Clinic. Another change that they made is that they made a consistent upper level step back at the street for the MU8 and MU11, but they added a provision to maintain that same standard in the Sugar House Business District. So there's going to be a little bit of variation there. They increased the number of uses that are allowed in the transitional overlay. This was basically areas that are currently industrial that are going to start transitioning, because we know we've already had property owners approach the city about rezoning in this area, and our plans call for this to be a mixed use area as it transitions. This is mainly the 700 West corridor on the west side of I-15. So they expand some uses so that some of those existing uses don't become non-conforming during that transition period. And then finally, it becomes effective. Sorry, I got something stuck in my throat. In 3 months from last night, so October 8th. And I think that's all we had.
Thank you. I want to note a couple of things. Commissioner Barrett is here. Also, the agenda has been amended since it was published a while ago. And so the first item, which was the local landmark site designation, has been postponed. So if you're here for that, you'll have to come to the next meeting. The next thing we're going to consider are the meeting minutes for June 25th, 2025. I was the only person absent from that meeting. So does someone have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 25th.
I can second that.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Christensen and a second from Commissioner Vila. Any discussion? Okay, we're going to vote. I will vote last. Amy Berry, Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Leverett.
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett.
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Vila. Will you vote on the minutes? Thank you. Thank you. That was a yes, and I'm going to abstain because I wasn't here. So those minutes are accepted. Now it's time for the open forum where commissioners can discuss planning, zoning, and general land use items that are not listed on the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to discuss or discuss in the future? So some things that I think might be helpful that we could get training on in the future going forward is like pinning down our motion procedure. So if you make a motion and then a substitute motion and all of that kind of stuff, like what are the steps that need to be done to make motions happen? And what are our options there? And then also maybe some help with crafting motions so that if we want to do something different than what's recommended by staff, that we're proficient in making a motion to do that. So those are things I think would be helpful in the future. Anybody else?
Real quick, are we directly following Robert's rules, or are we following a modified variation on Robert's rules?
So my understanding is that our rules don't directly refer to Robert's Rules of Order, but we've got some precedent on what we've been doing, so the conversation is going to happen with training, with management, administration, the attorneys, that kind of stuff, so we know for sure what rules we're following.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item number 2 on our agenda is a text amendment and street vacation at approximately 240 West, 200 North. The planner in this case is Grant Amen. If you'll introduce this project to us.
Testing. All right. All right, are we loaded here? There we go. All right, thank you so much. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Grant Amen, and I will be representing the Public Lands Amendment and 200 North Street vacation today. This item consists of 2 city-initiated petitions. Both of them are legislative petitions that will require approval from City Council after recommendation from this Planning Commission. The first petition is a text amendment that is primarily focused on the Public Lands PL zoning district. The second petition is a vacation of a portion of a street that would be part of the PL zoning district if vacated. As background information, these petitions are a result of the high school improvement bond that was approved by Salt Lake City voters in November of last year, 2024. As a reminder, this general obligation bond was issued for, quote, the purpose of raising money for constructing and acquiring buildings and furnishing and remodeling and updating existing school property under the charge of the board, unquote. As a result of voter approval, the Salt Lake City Council adopted the Temporary Land Use Regulations, TLUR, during a meeting in February of this year. During that discussion, it was made clear that the intent of the TLUR was to become permanent. The TLUR ordinance outlines the regulations necessary for the Salt Lake City School District to move forward with the voter-approved bond. For this presentation, I will first discuss the proposed text amendment, and then I will discuss the proposed street vacation. For both petitions, staff is recommending that the commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. First, the proposed text amendments. The proposed text amendments are in line with the temporary land use regulation that was already heard by City Council. The TLUR allows for the increased maximum height up to 125 feet for K through 12 public schools. So again, it's not everything within the PL zoning district, it's just K through 12 public schools within that district. It reduces setbacks when the school property is next to non-residential zones. It allows certain school-related obstructions in required yards, for example, things like playground equipment, athletic fields, or parking. It exempts K through 12 public schools from the Historic Preservation Overlay District provisions. And finally, it gives the planning director authority to approve modifications needed for health and safety purposes. And I'll just pause there quick. Health and safety purposes are sort of what we're limited to as Salt Lake City zoning in terms of regulation. These provisions granted by the TLUR were given a 180-day deadline because of the intent to formalize the regulations now with this proposal. This petition's proposed text amendment includes the same provisions as before, but now clearly delineated within relevant sections of the municipal code. Because of the way SLC's code is written, in order to apply the TLUR, the sections of code proposed to be amended are listed here. 21A.32, the PL district, the HP overlay 34, and the chapter on conformance with lock and bolt controls, which is 21A.36. Second, the street vacation portion of this item. This petition is proposed in order to enable the school district to further utilize a portion of West High's campus as part of the approved bond. This portion of West High's track and field is technically still a part of 200 North, according to a lease agreement from 1987. In 1987, the school initiated a track and field that exists today. and you can see it here on this map. This lease agreement outlines the approved use for the property, but now it would hinder the school's development plan and consolidation of the campus parcels. By vacating the portion of the street, the city would enable the school district to consolidate their property into their entire campus there. The eastern portion of 200 North contains a turnaround, as you can see, that provides access to several properties, and therefore it is important to note that no constructed portion of 200 North will be impacted by this vacation, and we're going around it. And that is important to note. I've had a few emails and calls and concerns worried that they would lose access, and that is not part of this request. Additionally, the school district will maintain access to their property off of 300 West. So they're not going to be opening that turnaround to access the school. The school will be accessed off of 300 West. Next, the considerations for approval for both petitions listed in the staff report are as follows. First, general and community plans. Staff finds that the TLUR and the proposed amendments facilitate the school district and adhere to the adopted plans. Second, historic district standards. There currently are no K-12 public schools that are considered contributing buildings. Only a portion of West High's tennis courts were technically within the boundaries of the local historic district. Third, zoning requirements. Staff finds that the proposal complies with the general purpose statement of the code in the PL district. And fourth are standards that apply only to the street vacation petition portion of this item, continued on this slide. In order to approve street vacation, staff applies Utah State Code, which states that a legislative public hearing should be held, like this one, to determine if good cause exists and that no public interest or any person will be materially injured by the proposed vacation. Staff has found and indicated that good cause exists and that no public interest will be injured by this proposal. And second, Salt Lake City policy for vacations is to analyze if there are sufficient public policy reasons to justify the vacation, and the city council should determine whether the stated public policy reasons outweigh alternatives to the vacation of the street. The alternative to this proposal would likely be a lease continuation, but the property would remain a public street. This would hinder the consolidation of lots on West High School's campus and hinder the development plan as approved by the bond. Further public policy reasons are outlined in the staff report and demonstrate that the proposal is the preferred option for Salt Lake City. And finally, staff is recommending approval of both the petitions with 3 conditions that are only applicable to the street vacation petition. I'll go over the conditions here in short, but the full language of the conditions are listed in the staff report. First, due to significant utilities running under 200 North, the city will require an access and maintenance easement over the property. Second, the eastern construction portion of 200 North will remain unimpacted and access for those applicable properties will remain as it is currently. And third, the vacated portion of 200 North will be consolidated as part of a larger effort to consolidate the various smaller parcels that serve as West High School's campus. There's quite a few. All in all, based on analysis in the staff report, including compliance analysis, staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council for both petitions with the conditions listed in the staff report. With that, thank you. And this concludes my presentation. I am happy to take questions, and I know I had one earlier that wanted to see a map. And this is not a map of all the PL districts, but it is a map of all of our public schools. And because this text amendment only applies to the public schools, I mean, these are the options, but again, this is really as a result of the bond that was passed, and the main focus of that would be West High. There's a couple other on our other high schools, so that's the focus for right now. But yeah, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have clarifying questions for right now to ask staff? I would like to see a map, if you can pull up, of all the PL zones, like where, like the lots that are PL zoned, so that we can see where this rule would take effect, because it's based on the use, but the use can change within a zone.
Unfortunately, because we have so many zoning districts and everything changes all the time, I don't have one of just the PL zoning district, but I can pull up this one and we can sort of take a look. But again, this is mostly going to apply to these properties here. We have a lot of public land in the city, and it will mostly just apply to the schools.
I think
why
we,
they're not showing
we
up.
talked about this one time before when we considered a private school that wanted to do something on a lot, but this rule specifically means just public schools?
Exactly. It's exclusively K through 12 public schools. So the university also would not be included in that. It's just, it's not chartered schools. It's just K through 12 public schools within.
Are charter schools considered public schools?
It kind of depends
for
on which one.
use?
I guess, yeah, I guess.
They are, but under state code, charter schools have different rules that we can apply from a zoning perspective.
Okay. So functionally, this would just affect if someone wanted to have a public K through 12 school on a PL zone.
Correct.
Exactly, correct.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, and you may not know this, as part of the design process for a new school or school improvements, the SLC school board is also required to go through a public hearing process, correct?
I'm not sure, but I don't
No
think
idea.
so.
I don't know.
Can, excuse me, can you explain to me the significance of the 125 feet? Because it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, given my understanding of how schools look and function.
I don't know. I might have to pass the ball on this.
So initially, the rebuild of West High is going to occur on the east side of 300 West, where right now they have their most of athletic types of facilities. And that site is fairly constrained compared to most typical high school properties. And so the school district believed they were going to have around 105 feet of building height. And so the temporary land use regulations allowed up to 125 feet. Since then, they have been able to reduce that height and spread the footprint. So it was, let me go back. The building had portions that were 125, not the whole thing. And then that became too costly. And so they've shrunk the taller parts and increased the shorter parts to make it more uniform. So at this point, we don't know exactly how high it'll be. So the purpose of the temporary land use regulations was there was a bill at the state legislature that would have exempted public schools from all local regulations, but only in cities of the first class in a first class county. There's one of those, and that's Salt Lake City. And so the council enacted those temporary land use regulations to prevent that bill from being adopted. So it's possible that by the time we anticipate that at least for West High School and Highland High School, the school district will come in and get their zoning review, which they're required to do. We're limited in what we can apply from zoning compared to other properties, but we anticipate that'll happen within the temporary land use regulations, and we'll have a much better idea about what that height will actually end up being. So my guess is they won't come close to 125 feet.
The temporary land use regulations, when those were adopted, they weren't heard by the planning commission. I don't remember that.
So temporary land use regulations are not required to be heard by the planning commission. In fact, they only require 24-hour notice. by the city council. And the reason for that is those are limited in how they can be used when there's a countervailing public interest. So there has to be something very, very unique to protect the public interest associated with that. In this case, that public interest is and was the voter approved bond of $700+ million. And the need to, in order to get in their construction drawings and order particularly the steel necessary for building the building, they felt like they had to get some plans going sooner rather than later. And so the council chose to enact temporary land use regulations.
And hence the 180-day time limit on those as well.
So this is maybe the first public hearing on those rules being enacted? I mean, maybe the council had a public hearing when they
No, they're
did
not
them?
required to hold a public hearing for that.
Okay, so this would be the first public kind of open.
Or the city zoning, correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other kind of clarifying questions for right now? We'll hear public comment next.
Yeah, one question. So it looked like based on the timeline for the West High and for the two schools currently, they have to get their plans in within that 180 days anyway. So what we're talking about is actually applying to basically all the other schools later, not so much to these two.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's an outside chance that they won't be able to get their zoning review.
Yeah.
They don't need the same types of plans that like a private development would have to have because we're so limited in what we can look at.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood correctly that it's basically they already have that for those two. And so we're really talking about everything else, or if they want to do something in the future on those sites. So
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing now. If you'd like to speak on this item, you can submit a card with your name, and I'll call people up to speak. There's a 2-minute limit to your comments if you're a member of the public. If you're representing a recognized community organization, is anyone here from the community council? You get more time if you are. Okay. So everyone will get 2 minutes to speak. When I call your name, come on up to the microphone and state your name for the record, and then we'll start your time. So up first will be Leland Stevens, and then J. Stephen Keys, and then H. Grundall.
Sit. Hope that didn't start my time already.
I didn't start yet.
So I had a few concerns. I live in that neighborhood.
Will you
right-
tell us your name?
Leland Stevens. I live in the neighborhood right next to West High or adjacent to West High. And so I have some concerns about what's going on there, which this is the first I've heard of any public hearing about what's going on with West High, and so I'm a little concerned that we haven't had previous notifications as to what they had planned. But my main concern is traffic. We already live in an area that's had seen increase in traffic, which by changing some of these things, I think we're going to increase our traffic substantially. And then also parking in that area is quite limited. And so by changing some of this, I'm concerned about some of the parking. It's difficult to even get to my own driveway sometimes because of all the increased traffic, and the streets are packed with cars. So I can't even park in front of my own house at this point. And so I'm concerned about parking, I'm concerned about traffic, I'm concerned about the increase in height. This building that they're planning to put in my backyard, basically, is going to obstruct my view. We've lived there for many years in this house, and it's been nice to kind of look out the back and see a beautiful sunset. And now when I look out the back, all I'm going to see is building. And so we're increasing traffic, decreasing parking, we're obstructing our view. And then also, I didn't go to West High, but my mother and grandmother and many of my family members did. And so I'm a little concerned about the way it's going to affect the beauty of West High. So those are some of my concerns.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to hear from J. Stephen Keys, and then H. Grundall, and then Alex Dulwick.
I'm concerned about the Warm Springs Fault. It runs all the way down Second West. I think it's idiotic to build a building that's 13 stories high or 12 stories high or any height other than what they have when there can be liquefaction in an earthquake. We have a Warm Springs and we have a fault line, the Warm Springs Fault. And it's just I was in the Prieta Loma or Loma Prieta, whatever it's called, in San Francisco when it happened. I saw houses that liquefied, that went from 4 stories down to the roof on the pavement, and the people inside died. I think it could happen here. I think we should always assume worst-case scenario, especially when children are involved. And that fault runs from Idaho down to St. George. The Warm Springs, that's the Wasatch Fault, but the Warm Springs Fault has changed. When they wanted to build the convention center, they rewrote the maps and brought, like with the marking pencil, it jutted right behind the conference center and then came down around State Street. And I worked on that, and I know that place, I started out in the parking lot like 10 stories down, and we always had to pump. And I live on one of the affected properties in Spring. I don't know what the perk test has shown, but in Spring, you go down 3 feet, you're just about at the water table. And my basement is never flooded, but it comes close. It comes right up to the top of the drains, and therefore they raised up the floor, so when they did do it. But I know I'm out of time, but I really think this is a deciding issue, is the Warm Springs Fault. And I just think it's a terrible thing.
That's time. Sir, could you state your name for the record?
It's John Steve Keys, Keyes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll hear from H. Grundall, then Alex Delwick, then Sarah Gillens. Tell us your name real quick. Yeah, tell us your name, and then you can speak for 2 minutes.
H.G. Grondal, 239 West, 300 North. We were pretty concerned when we seen all these high-rise where you can't even look across the street. We got the baseball field home plate is right at our backyard. And when I seen the pictures of all these high-rises, I'm going like, you gotta be kidding. We've been there since '69, so we've been there for over 50 years, and we sure don't need a bunch of high-rise crap. I guess that's all I've got to say.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you guys making public comments today. Next is Alec Delwick, and then Sarah Gillens, and then Tyler Peterson, and then Colin Kingsbury. State your name so we know.
Alex Stolwick. I live at 222 North 200 West, which is directly across from the baseball field. Tonight, I just wanted to kind of take you back on how we got here. In the 90s, there was a Capitol Hill master plan put in place with wording in there saying that Salt Lake and West High wouldn't institutionalize across the street or institutionalize more residential area. And the intent behind that was West High was supposed to stay where West High is. Now that can be vaguely interpreted, right? Because the city does own the land. But the intent behind that was not to move West High, and nobody thought that would happen in the 90s because they just paid $30 million to do seismic upgrades to West High. Additionally, I have great concerns around the historical preservation overlay. As stated, it's just the tennis courts, but if you look at the drawings for the building, a big portion of that building is in the tennis courts, and that removes any public comment on historical overlay or design aspects. As stated today, this is the first public hearing on this. The school board had 3 options for the school, and the first 2 that were proposed were to keep it on the west half of 300 West, but they made the decision to move it across the street. With that being said, we're only having this meeting because they cannot legally build there with the setbacks, height requirements, and current lease that they have on 200 North. The lease for 200 North states that they must follow all current zoning that applies for that area, including setbacks, landscape, and maintenance. Again, they're looking to vacate the street to allow them the ability to build as they see fit. So again, my view will be obstructed. I have concerns about the traffic and all that. My final comment is the decision on this is not just for West High, right? This will affect schools in the avenues, schools in other historic overlay districts. This specifically gives the school district a blank check.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Sarah Gillens, then Tyler Peterson, then Colin Kingsbury.
I did not say it, but I wrote something.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Note that she's written previous comments in opposition to this application. Tyler Peterson.
Hi, I'm Tyler Peterson. I will share a border with the school. I just find it funny that they're going to get rid of the historic overlay because one of my other neighbors had to spray paint off of their house because they painted their house. So I think it's just funny that we're just going to completely get rid of that. I voted for the bond. I mean, I'm happy they're building the school. My kids will go there, but I feel like there's been no consideration about the back of the school, the back, which is 200 West, which is our neighborhood. It's just from the looks of the plans, it's mostly going to be parking. Seems like that's kind of the biggest thing that people are worried about is building a ton of parking so everyone has a personal parking space. I think we could integrate this into the neighborhood better. Green space, I don't know, anything really. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Colin Kingsbury.
Hi, I'm Colin Kingsbury. Thank you for seeing us today. I've lived in the neighborhood since 1989, and I am a West High School alum. As previously mentioned, there are grave concerns with the traffic and parking on 200 West, which was not considered during the presentation today. Talked a lot about 200 North, but not 200 West, which is a very busy street that has speed bumps due to the increased traffic. Furthermore, as Mr. Dolwick mentioned, West High was always supposed to stay on the west side of 300 West. This is a significant change, which will really cut into the neighborhood, and a neighborhood that is in no way constructed to house a high school. It's barely can hold the apartments that are on there. So just speaking in opposition to this, and I really hope if you guys could come and drive down 200 West at about 8 in the morning just to see the traffic that's already there and see how this would significantly impact us. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to speak on this item, you can just come to the microphone and speak now. Do we have any new email messages? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. And now the commission can ask questions of staff. Tell us what you think.
I have a question. Grant, can you give us some more information on which plan was referenced in the public comments? Was it was it specifically just for West High, or was it the West Side, or that particular community council master plan? Was it in the master plan? What was he referencing? That West High should remain on the west side of Third West?
Oh. Yeah, I'm not exactly positive what plan specifically, but I believe it is mentioned in the Capitol Hill master plan.
So it's in the adopted Capitol Hill master plan.
We're verifying that.
Yeah, I don't,
Say that again?
I don't know the exact language either.
We're verifying that.
Okay, thank you. Let me know when you do that.
My question is, well, what I want to say is that when we're considering changes to zoning and like changing the way anybody can build a K through 12 public school on a PL zoned lot, that doesn't just affect West High. So the answer right now is that a portion of West High is currently on a historic district map.
That's right. An upper corner of West High, and this is in the staff report, but this upper rightmost tennis court is within the historic district. Nothing's considered contributing, and generally that's how our standards are applied to buildings that are considered contributing. And again, the west side of 300 West, where the school sits currently, is not in a local historic district, nor is it considered a contributing building.
Right. There are schools that may not be in a historic district right now, but they exist as schools and they're on PL lots, and that's the use that they have, that they also would forever be exempt from being subject to the historic district rules.
Yes.
Okay.
Quickly clarifying, it looked like in the staff report that the state enabling legislation for planning specifically exempts all schools already from historic codes. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought this up. Technically, we have had public hearings. They've just been at the state level, and they're not hearings, but at committee meetings, there was an opportunity to discuss this. Granted, those are extremely difficult to track and to follow, and there's so many bills and whatnot. But you bring up a great point, Commissioner, that yes, the state has made a lot of regulation, or I should say, exempts the school district from regulation, design standards already.
So this is what the state code says. It says regarding schools, public schools, a municipality may not impose requirements for landscaping, fencing, aesthetic consideration, construction methods or materials, additional building inspections, municipal building codes, building used for educational purposes, or the placement or use of temporary classroom facilities on schools. We may also not impose regulations upon the location of an educational facility except as necessary to avoid unreasonable risks to health or safety. And so this is what the Capitol Hill plan says. There's a policy that says prohibit the expansion of institutional uses associated with the West High School campus into the residential neighborhoods.
Is that the current That's in effect right now,
Yes.
master plan?
That's what that I was reading straight from the.
Okay.
And I believe that was what was referenced earlier. If it was something else, I haven't seen it, or I don't know it off the top of my head, but that is the reference that I have listed in the staff report.
I think it was probably interpreted a little different of what that expansion means. So thanks for clarifying that.
I can't seem to pull up the zoning map correctly. It's only showing me the historic overlay. Do you know what the zoning currently is to the north and east of this parcel?
Man, I believe it's residential. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, I think we're having technical difficulties. I tried to pull up multiple of our zoning maps before this, and they seem to all be down right now. So, but yes,
Give us a moment. We're on it.
What was that?
We're working on it.
Excellent. Is it like a single family residential, or is it going to be a low density multifamily?
I believe it's single family residential, but I have to double check.
So directly, the eastern block of the West High campus, the northeastern portion of that block is zoned SR1A, which is a single and two family residential zoning district. And then along 200 West, the residential properties are zoned a combination of RMF 35 and RMU. So RMF 35 you're fairly familiar with I mean, most of the commission. That's basically a multifamily up to 35 feet in building height. And the RMU is a high-density residential mixed-use zoning district that allows buildings up to 75 feet in height.
Is RMU getting consolidated as part of the MU consolidation?
Yes, effective on October 8th, it becomes MU8. So that's a 90-foot height limit.
Excellent. Thank you.
I'll just kick off the discussion portion, I guess. So one of the things that I think is always difficult with these, but extraordinarily difficult regarding this one, is the temporary land use procedure, and that we're dealing with an entity outside of Salt Lake City, like the school board, that we don't have any oversight of. And so that can be nebulous for anyone, but especially the neighborhood. And our role as a planning commission is always very technical, but I will say that listening to the comments and reading them and reading the staff report, one of the things that I'm not in favor of at this point is a positive recommendation with the height limit being 125, even though, because we don't know what it'll be. We were trying to make a recommendation. The city council ultimately decides this, but we're trying to make a recommendation on a moving target that we have no idea what it is, and that it does have implications for other potential or other rebuilds that will occur in the future in other school lands, other PL lands. And so I think that at this point, I feel like the standards for the general text amendment, item number 6, so the impact on other properties, I'm in disagreement with the recommendation being positive in that we have some negative impacts to the community related to this moving target of height, but as it is stated in this, it's 125 feet. If it comes in less, that's great, but we don't know what that'll be. I'm also citing number 6 as well as the reduction in setbacks. So we're looking at a reduction in setbacks from the side yard from 50 to 30 feet, and a rear yard, which I don't know, I'm assuming our rear yard is 200 west in this. See, we don't know. We don't know how the school's going to be sited. So again, we're trying to make decisions on a recommendation on an unknown factor, but a rear yard setback reduction from 100 feet to 50 feet, and if the rear yard is 200 west, then I think we have some potentially negative impacts to the neighborhood, but we don't know. And so I'm not in favor of a positive recommendation at this time, mainly because we have no idea what really this is going to look like and how these impacts may actually affect the neighborhood.
Can I make a few clarifying points on that? So 200 West is considered a front yard. So right now, under the current regulations, because it's a street frontage. So that property has 3 front yards, basically, on 300 West, 300 North, and 200 West. And so the interior side yard reduction to 30 feet is only when the property is not next to a residential zone or a manufacturing zoning district. So there it stays the same as 50
What's
feet.
the reduction grant on the, what is the setback on the front yard, since we have 3 front yards? What's the setback for that?
30 feet.
30 feet, right.
It's 30 feet.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It doesn't change my feelings about the potential impacts, given that we just don't have any idea what the school board is going to actually propose. And to make a positive recommendation to the city council on a temporary land use that is a moving target, I don't feel is the best approach.
But can I go back to a point made earlier, which is that at least for these 2 high schools, the approval will come under the temporary rules, in which case, I don't know that it follows. I mean, what we're talking about is a going forward that would affect other decisions down the road when these become permanent. But this West High will be cited under the temporary rules, right?
Yes, before August, I believe. It's in the staff report. It's like mid-August, August 15th.
Which is still odd that the 125-foot number, which was a number driven by this site, and now probably 20 or 40 feet higher than will be needed, or some amount higher than will be needed, is a vestige that will float forward into all future. I mean, that's just odd to me. It's more than required here. It's odd.
I think one thing, at least I missed it in the staff report, but I appreciated that you brought it up, was that this is another thing that's kind of a stopgap to prevent there being nothing in terms of zoning in this case. So it's been many years, but I've worked on a number of schools, and a lot of school districts are an entity unto themselves and aren't beholden to any local zoning laws, like a number of them outside or around here. And so basically they police their own sites. And so they're their own zone and they do what they want on their zone. And at least from what you were saying, it sounds like the legislature was moving to do the same with the schools in Salt Lake. Is that?
So mostly.
Okay.
So there has long been this misconception, including amongst cities and school districts, that schools are exempt from zoning already. They are not. And there's been several, that's pretty clear as we read the code and as we talked to the school district about it. There's also been several decisions made by the Utah Property Rights Ombudsman that has said schools are subject to zoning. It's just cities and local governments are very limited in what they can apply from a zoning. So basically, it's kind of even basic setbacks and height.
Okay.
Even driveway locations, we can't necessarily dictate where those are. We can only impose conditions on driveway locations if it creates an imminent public safety hazard. So too close to an intersection, something like that.
Okay. But what the legislature was trying to do was basically to move to that, where
to say you can't apply at all.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in general, I think my kind of position on the actual zoning portion of zoning ramifications is I think that most of them are fine and make sense. I think the 125-foot height limit is excessive, especially when we're thinking we haven't looked at all the different places where it might be applied. I do get that it's another thing where like we're towing a line and trying to not lose all control, but within that, I think most of it is fine, but the height limit I think is excessive to just kind of throw out there without looking into it more. So that's all.
I guess I would start by advocating perhaps a position of deference to the school district more so than maybe other property owners, right? This is, at least in theory, an entity that is subject to small d democratic control, right? There is the Salt Lake School Board. They are subject to the will of the people and the will of the legislature, whether you think our legislature is particularly democratic or not. And if what the board feels is that in order to accommodate the growing needs of Salt Lake City, right? We just saw, I think it was in Building Salt Lake it was in the Trib, that Salt Lake is the fastest growing city for the third year in a row in Utah, right? We have a lot of population growth. We're trying to bring families back into the city, and I think that it is not unreasonable to give Salt Lake School District the space it needs in order to act and construct new school buildings with an eye towards the future, and with an eye towards the growth of our city and frankly the changing form of our city, right? We're talking about, this is surrounded by MU11. What's the height, or what is to be, sorry, MU8? What is the height on MU8?
90 feet.
90 feet. So pretty similar, right, to that 125-foot limit. Obviously, West High is already approved under the temporary land use, but I also think that, like, as we are looking towards the future, I don't think it's unreasonable to say all of these other schools that are owned by Salt Lake School District should also have an opportunity to, with under the purview of the Salt Lake School Board, be able to construct the kind of buildings that they feel are pedagogically appropriate to accommodate the needs of the students, whether that be an elementary school in the Avenues or when we eventually need to rebuild East High School. This gives them that opportunity, and it allows us to move into the future with a genuinely exciting opportunities to innovate in the sort of school design space. And I think that is not something that we should step back from. I don't think that's something that we should step back from or shy away from, just because in the past we are more used to, say, lower rise school buildings.
I want to recognize that the comments that we heard today from the public and I believe all the ones that I read were not in favor of this change to the zoning because the people who live near West High are considering how that specific thing fits in their neighborhood. For the historical context, the general plan for the community, height and views, traffic and parking concerns, and some of those things are outside of why we're talking about this right now. But the thing I want to recognize is that this change to rules doesn't only affect West High. We know that Highland is going to be rebuilt right now. Any of the schools, Whittier, just off State Street, could be rebuilt. And the changes that are made on this text amendment they apply in a lot of places that I think people don't even know that they're kind of in play right now. But I really appreciate you coming and making your comments so that we know what the concerns are in particular. I looked up Salt Lake City School District. I just searched for West High rebuild, and Salt Lake City School District has a page for the West High rebuild, so our contact information. There's like videos of public hearings and stuff like that. So I really think that as neighbors of that project, you should be talking and be heard by them too. So I hope that you'll look that up and find a way to give your comments to the school district as well. Any more discussion we can do, or someone can make a motion?
I'm willing to make a motion if there's no further discussion. Okay. Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the commission recommends to the city council deny this request for the following reasons, specifically standards for general text amendment number 6, cites impacts on properties, and we have a negative impact on property due to increased height to 125 feet, potential reduction in setbacks given we do not know the configuration or the site, the siting of the school in these plans, and traffic and parking are also unknown potential negative impacts.
I'll second.
Was that Commissioner Scott? Thank you. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Berry and a second by Commissioner Scott. Are there any questions or other actions you want to take on the motion?
I failed to also say this was PLN PCM 2025-003. I ran out of air. PLN PCM 2025-00320.
So this is just for the text amendment. The street
Correct.
vacation is a separate issue.
Correct.
Thank you.
And just to be absolutely clear, our recommendation for the denial can be turned down by the city council, correct? And also would not prevent this particular project from being implemented, correct?
That's my understanding.
All
Does
right.
that comport with
Yes.
what
Thank
you guys believe?
All they need to do is have their zoning before the temporary land use regulations expire.
And then they're entitled under these
That
regulations.
basically vests them, entitles them to that approval.
Okay. All right. We're going to vote. We'll start with.
Is there a process for a competing motion, or do we have to
Yeah,
vote
you can do a
first?
substitute motion.
Okay.
Which we would vote on the substitute motion first, and if that, whatever happens there, then we go back to the original motion.
Okay, so I propose a substitute motion for PLN PCM 2025-00320. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council adopt this request.
Any second?
Clarification, you're saying you have a motion to amend. Specifically, what is it that you're asking to amend?
It's not an amendment, it's a substitute.
Say it again, please.
It's not an amendment, it's a substitute motion. So it's a completely different motion.
So we set aside the motion to send a negative recommendation, and now we're considering Commissioner Rosenfield has made a motion that we send a positive recommendation to the council, and that's what we're considering now. We have a motion from Commissioner Rosenfield. Does anyone second that motion?
I'll second.
Was that Commissioner Leverett?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Rosenfield and a second by Commissioner Leverett. Any other action or questions or discussion on that motion? Okay, we'll vote on that. This is the motion that Commissioner Rosenfield presented. Commissioner Christensen,
No.
Commissioner Scott,
No.
Commissioner Leverett,
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
No.
Commissioner Vila,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenfield,
Yes.
and I'm going to vote no, so that motion does not pass. So we'll revert back to the original motion by Commissioner Berry. Does anyone need to be reminded of what that is, or do you know? Okay. That was by Commissioner Berry, seconded by Scott. So Commissioner Vila, would you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenfield,
No.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett,
No.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Leverett,
No.
and I'm going to vote yes. That's 5 yeses for that motion. So we will, and 3 against, 3 noes. So we'll forward a positive motion. I'm sorry. We'll forward a recommendation,
To City Council.
a negative recommendation for this text amendment to the City Council. Everybody? Okay, thank you. We have another item under consideration if someone wants to make a motion for that.
Madam Chair, I have a question on that. Well, I guess, never mind. I answered it myself. Never mind.
Perfect.
Question.
Yes.
When the commission is non-unanimous, obviously the top line that goes to the council is the negative recommendation. Is there any information provided to the council about the non-unanimity of the vote?
How do you present that? 5 yeses and 3 noes or something like that?
Yeah, we usually put something like that in the transmittal to them.
Thank you.
And my understanding is that the staff, the planning division, is still going to make a recommendation to the city council.
Our recommendation doesn't change, right?
Right.
So we have a recommendation, the planning commission will have a recommendation, then the city council gets
Well,
to
it might.
decide.
Would it ever? Would you ever change your recommendation based on our discussion or voting?
I wouldn't say never, but in this case, no. I mean,
Okay.
you know, like the planning commission's recommendation is what is required by state code. So our recommendation isn't. We actually don't have to give a recommendation.
Right.
So that's what the city council mostly will consider, and they'll ask us why, and they'll have access to the minutes and the video, and we'll bring up the what was listed in the motion.
Okay.
And then they'll decide what to do with it.
Thank you. All right. Any other motions on this project?
I'd like to make a motion. This is for PLN PCM 2025-00321. Based on the information presented and discussion, I move that the commission recommends that the city council approve the request to vacate the portion of right-of-way on 200 North with the listed conditions as recommended by staff.
I'll second.
Was that Commissioner Scott? Thank you. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Commissioner Scott. Any discussion or questions, activity on that motion? Okay, we'll vote. Commissioner Barrett,
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry,
No.
Commissioner Leverett,
Yes.
Commissioner Vila,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
I'm going to vote yes. So that's 7 yeses and 1 no to send a recommendation in favor of the street vacation to the city council. Okay, that's the end of that. Can I quickly restate what we just decided so that it's very clear to the people who took the time to come here? We are sending a negative recommendation for making these rules permanent, making them a permanent change to the rules for Salt Lake City. But we're recommending that they do adopt the street vacation. So they'll have another hearing, they'll do voting for their own discussion and that kind of thing. So continue to pay attention to the city council's calendar if you want to continue to speak on this. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is we're okay on time. Are we okay on time? Okay. We're going to go right into the next item, which is alley vacation on approximately 470 East and 1300 South. The planner on this request is Seth Rios. If you'll present it to us.
Hi, so I'm here to present on an application to vacate the alley between 13th South and Sherman Avenue. So this request comes from a private citizen who lives on the block that we're talking about. They submitted the request. Essentially, they're proposing to vacate all of the alley except for a portion along 4 properties who use that alley to access parking. So they have parking at the back of their property. They don't have driveways in the front. So that part's excluded from the request, but they're proposing that the city vacate all of the alley, the rest of the alley. So there's the dimensions on the screen there. They're only required to get 75% of signatures from the property owners who are next to the alley. They have 84%. And so the recommendation that staff is giving is that Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council, and I'm going to go over the reasoning for that here. So brief history about the alley. It was created when the subdivision was recorded in 1910. It's very old. I have an image on the screen here of a Sanborn map. So basically a Sanborn map is a map that was created by fire insurance companies way back in the day. They made very detailed records of buildings and how they sit on the lot, and it was for insurance purposes, but they can be very useful to kind of show us the conditions of properties back in the day. So this specific Sanborn map is from 1950, and it shows that even in 1950, 75 years ago, a lot of property owners had kind of built a shed or an accessory structure on their property, and that the alley was no longer used as an alley for access and by means of accessing the properties, except for the 4 parcels that are on the far west side. In the overall subdivision, that whole neighborhood, about half of the alleys that go east-west have been vacated. This one has not been vacated yet. That's what this proposal is for. So most of the alley is inaccessible just because people have built over it, and it's been that way, we know, at least since 1950. If you go there today, you look at it, you see garages built over it, trees, vegetation, fences. So here's a picture of each side of the alley entrance. So the picture on the left is the west entrance. So as soon as you enter in this alley, like I said, 3 properties use it to access their parking, but then you see this image right here on the left side. So a garage, a fence, trees, vegetation. On the right side, it's the east entrance, and as you can see, people have paved over it, and there's utility power poles going and garages. So in the chapter of code that talks about alley vacations, you're supposed to meet one of these standards in order to be able to request that or propose that the city vacate an alley. So one of these 3 things: lack of use, the alley proposes public safety issue, urban design, or community purpose. Those are 4 reasons that for which an alley could be vacated. The applicant is saying that this alley meets the lack of use standard. So it just hasn't been used as an alley as it was proposed for a very long time, and that's why they're requesting this alley vacation. So I showed that map from 1950s. I couldn't find any records before that showed how the properties were built. I'm unsure if it was really ever used as an alley or for how long it was used as an alley. And like I mentioned, there's limited accessibility, vegetation, structures, utility poles. Something I did want to mention before I move on to the recommendation slide. We route this out to city departments for comments and concerns that they may have. Engineering is the department that manages public right-of-way and alleys. They usually send a comment that says, it's not generally in the interest to vacate city property. But I did want to share something that was shared with me after I wrote the staff report. So in their department, they have this scale that they use to kind of rate each alley in the city. A 0 means that an alley is obstructed and it's not usable as an alley for access or for any means that engineering would use. And a 10 means that it's, perfect alley, able to use it in good street condition, pavement condition is all good. For this alley, they gave it a -2, which is not even on their scale, but that's the number they have it assigned to it. So that just means basically there's no real hope of ever using it just because there's so many structures that have built into that alley space. It's been there for so long. It's just clear that engineering has no intention of using it as an alley based on that score. So the next steps, you have the ability to make a recommendation to City Council. It will move on to City Council, who has final say over the matter, but they will see your recommendation that you make, and these are the options here. So if it's approved, the city has always followed a policy that the alley gets split in half and then gets given to the property owners who are abutting that alley. So this alley specifically is, I believe, 12 feet and 1 inch. So each property owner would just have 6 feet and half an inch added onto their legal description. As I mentioned before, the recommendation is that the city vacate the alley just because it hasn't been used that way for so long, and they meet the standard lack of use. So that's all I have for this presentation. If anybody has any questions for me.
Thank you. The applicant can speak now to us. You have 10 minutes to speak if you'd like to.
My name is Philip Wilkes. I live at 1470 East, 1300 South. I don't think I have a lot to add. A couple things, I guess. Looking at the maps, which I don't know if you guys have looked at the maps, but it's actually quite fun to look at all the old maps. And the original plat, which included, I think, 18 blocks essentially, 17 had alleyways when they were originally laid out, and there are only kind of 2.5 that actually still exist in this neighborhood. So part of that may be it doesn't really make sense on that lot. Like, people get stuck going up 13th South in the wintertime. You can imagine an alleyway that doesn't get plowed and is on that slope is going to be a mess to use. And that may be why it was never actually developed, because it just leveled driveways made more sense. But I feel like this is just kind of like a historical oversight that was forgotten about. I think 17 of the 25 properties, or actually 27 because I counted the other ones, so 15 of the 25 have structures built on the alley property as it is. So I just want to build a garage and not have it be 7 feet off the back of my rear fence line. So this was the only avenue I knew to be able to achieve that. So if you have any questions about specifics, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have clarifying questions for the applicant or the staff at this point? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this application? Yes. Linda Thomas would like to speak. You can, that microphone is working now. You can use that one. Thank you. You'll have 2 minutes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Linda Thomas. I live at 1477 on Sherman Avenue. I purchased the property. It has retaining walls on all 4 sides of my property. I had no idea there was an alley. I'm okay with there being an alley. I'm okay with it being vacated. My concern is that if they divide the 12-foot 1 inch, 6 foot and 6 foot, does the back of my 2 garages wind up sitting on my neighbor's property? And if it does, how is that resolved? There's nothing in the statute that said they have to divide the land 6 feet and 6 feet. They could divide it according to the existing retaining wall and fences that divide 13th South from Sherman all the way down. These structures have been there close to 100 years as far as the retaining wall and a lot of the buildings. It's going to cause a lot of conflict between the neighbors on the north and south wall. If it's not divided according to what it is my garage sitting on Brian's land? Or how do we resolve that? Because some of these walls are 7 and 8 feet high that separate the properties. And so if you want to pass the alley, giving the 6-foot land or whatever amount of land to each person, please do it according to the existing retaining walls that are in place. Otherwise, you can have 20-plus neighbors bickering over, whose land it is and asking people to tear down garages. And I really would like to keep both of my garages. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this item? Or do we have any new emails? Okay, I'm going to close the public comment. I'm going to ask staff to please respond to the question of if the alley is vacated, how is the land divided up?
So I believe it might be policy and not in the code that the alley is divided half and half. That's just how it's been done previously. Property owners still have the option to perform a lot line adjustment. So if there is any conflict that arises from over property line disputes, a lot line adjustment is a way that you can change your property line. So you have to, be in agreement with your neighboring owner and have their signature as well. And basically you lay out a new legal description. That's only if they choose to get a lot line adjustment, if they have issues with the way that things are laid out. As it is right now, a lot of buildings actually are built into the public alley space that the city owns. They're technically, it could be enforced on if the city chose to enforce on it. They haven't up to this point. But, vacating it or not vacating it doesn't really change the risk of, being over a property line. If a shed is in the alley or if it's on the neighbor's property, it's over their property line. So it doesn't really change anything in that sense. So lot line adjustment will still be an option. They can change their property lines if they like to, and if they're in agreement with their neighbor as well. I'm not aware of the city laying out the legal description and saying, oh, you take this fence and you take it here. I think that could get kind of complicated. But I don't know if we've done that before.
I guess I just have a question. The alley is 12 feet wide. Wouldn't it be as simple as 6 feet goes to north and south or east and west property lines, property owners? One, and then two, there are power poles in that alley that the rights of the property, those power poles have rights as well, and I would assume that's going to have to be, amended and included in this replatting of the, 25 houses that are butting up against this. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if this request is approved, that is how the alley will be split up. It'll just be half and half. Each owner will take half of the alley. And then with the power poles, Rocky Mountain might have easements on those properties. Those would still be in effect. As far as I know, they have been using the properties to access those power poles. So they don't use the alley to get to them. They'll go on the resident's property and access the poles if they need to. And I assume they will just continue to do that. We reached out to them for comments or concerns about this and didn't hear anything back from them. So they've been doing it a certain way without having access to the alley, so this wouldn't change anything.
They don't need the alley to access their poles, but the poles themselves, the power company has to be able to get to the lines and service them. And the only reason I ask this is this has happened in my neighborhood, which is 6 or 7 blocks from here, and the alley was vacated a number of years ago. There was a power outage a couple of years ago. Power companies simply had to come through the yards to get to the pole, and that's their right to do that, and that's what's going to happen here. It's probably happened, previously because they couldn't get through the alley anyway. But there's, in the replatting process, the property owner's plats have to change, but then there's a right of way for the pole to be in those specific locations. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if there will just be a utility easement or something placed.
So usually when an alley is vacated, all that changes is the legal description, and it will add a statement that says including X, like half of the abutting alley to the rear property line or something like that. So it doesn't actually change anything about creating new easements or anything else. Those are basically in perpetuity. for any utility provider that may be on that pole. They do have a right to cross private property to maintain their property, which is the pole and their wires.
So I want to echo Commissioner Vila's comments and concerns, but also a couple questions. One, maybe a little tongue in cheek, but Mr. Wilk, are you the first person in 75 years to ask permission to build here? Or?
No.
Okay.
I was pretty surprised actually that it wasn't vacated because the one survey that was done on the block listed that 6 feet as vacated. It said vacated alley. So I was pretty surprised. There's numerous, there was a garage that was built within the last 2 years, and I don't understand how they got the building permit to do it because it's also on the alley property. There's numerous garages within the last 20 years, as far as I can see, maybe 30 that have been built. I know one, the guy was just like, yeah, I didn't get permits for it and, screwed the city. But some of them, I'm sure they got permits. Like my old elderly neighbor, she followed all the rules, and I'm sure she pulled a building permit for it. And why they allowed it at the time, I have no idea. I don't know if it was just 15, 20 years ago, they just didn't have everything digitalized and an understanding of where the alley lands were or what. Honestly, I'm a bit confused by kind of the nature. It's 100 years of just people kind of doing stuff. Linda's concerned about the property line on the back. The back fence line definitely, it's not straight. So her concerns are definitely valid about where would that back property line actually be? And some garages are built right up against the line, which we don't really know where it is. And they're supposed to be a foot off, at least it's per new building permits and stuff like that.
All right. Thank you. So this may be more procedural than community kind of feedback and questions, but will we be able to condition the vacation and the property splits on possibly following the Utah doctrine of boundary by acquiescence? If there are existing boundaries that the neighbors respect, can we?
You can recommend that the council do that.
Okay. And I would just say, this is chaos that we're kicking down the line until you get a neighbor that buys a house that doesn't want a utility pole in their backyard and wants it in yours instead, especially if someone has to replace new poles. I don't know how miraculous these poles are, how long they've been there, but this is something we're punting down the line. It's not going to be pretty at all. But also physically, the -2, I see the -2, so it's not pretty now. So I'll probably vote in favor of this, but it's not going to be pretty for anyone down the line when someone wants to move something or do anything.
My question, does anybody know of a power pole that's been replaced? Because I certainly would like mine replaced. I don't do it.
I'm going to direct you to the utility.
Yeah.
Eventually they will. And I've seen an alley like this before when it has to be replaced and someone's like, not my yard, put it in his yard. Who's going to get the new pole? And how are you going to get back there? Whose garden is going to get tore up? Whose garage? And, you try to put it in the same place, but unless Salt Lake has some amazing poles that never get replaced, I see chaos happening here. So,
yeah, it has happened. You got a large tree, it falls over, it hits into the pole, hits the transformer burns, the pole gets damaged.
Yeah, they just put the pole back up and it's crooked. That's what happened in my alley. They didn't replace it. They just shoved it back up and it looks like it's going to fall over, but whatever. I was just, asking if that's I don't think that that's a common occurrence, but valid concern.
Are you done? Okay. I want to recognize two things. Number one, you have to meet one of these standards, you have to have a reason for vacating an alley, and the one that is being cited in this case is lack of use. But I don't think that this alley is not being used. It's just being used by the neighbors instead of the public. You need to like, consider that the alley is public land, like, we all own it. So it hasn't been a lack of use, there's a lack of maintenance, there's a lack of enforcement that's happened that hasn't kept this alley open. But when you go to this neighborhood, the alley that goes north-south is open. You can drive on it. I drove on it. You can start going on, I did. Maybe that seems shocking, but I drove on the alley that goes north-south. And you can start to turn. Will you show us the map that shows the overhead? So there's an alley that goes north and south that between 14.
Yeah, that's not included in this request. That'll remain public.
I know that. But it exists on paper and it exists in the real world. That's an alley you can drive on. You can start to drive on the alley that's being requested to be vacated. You can start driving on it. It's just at some point somebody has a fence and then somebody has a garage and somebody has a shed. So my argument would be that it doesn't meet the lack of use policy reason to vacate an alley. I think that it's just lack of maintenance, lack of enforcement. And then the other thing is that we need to show that one of the standards here, number 7, the petition furthers the city's preference for disposing of an entire alley rather than a small segment of it. And the staff report says that this request complies with that, and I think it doesn't comply with that. I think there's a whole north-south alley and a portion of the east-west alley that's not being requested to be vacated and wouldn't be vacated. So I don't think that it also meets that preference. So I think this alley request has a couple of strikes against it. This neighborhood has existing alleys in it, some that are used as alleys, some that are used as garage foundations. And when the question is my garage on my neighbor's lot? The real question is, your garage is on public land. Like, this is a piece of land that all of us own. And it hasn't been maintained that way and it hasn't been enforced that way, but it could be. And so I think that this request doesn't meet those two standards. So I don't feel like voting for it.
So in chapter 14, not 52, it gives a little bit more insight about the lack of use and what needs to happen in order for somebody to claim that standard. It says that the alley has to be materially blocked in a way that renders it unusable as a public right-of-way. So it's not that it's being used, it's that it's not being used as a public right-of-way. The Sanborn map shows it's been that way for 75 years, that some people use it, 3 properties use it for parking, but the rest of it's not usable as a public right-of-way. You can't drive through it. 25 people can't access their properties from it. So I would argue it does meet that just because it is materially blocked and it has been that way for a very long time. And then the other one says that we shouldn't vacate a small section of the alley. That is kind of up for interpretation just because this is not a small section that we're proposing to vacate. It's more like 80% of it, so it's the majority of it, but I see what you're saying. That is more of like an interpretation of the way that that's worded.
So I think most people here generally know I'm not in favor of alley vacations, and I generally agree with Commissioner Burrows in that assessment of that particular standard. This one is, for me, slightly different in that maybe it existed as a public right-of-way from 1910 to 1950 because we don't have data regarding when it was platted and then when the first Sanborn map shows that this perhaps never was a public right-of-way in the sense that we consider it today. I certainly think if we had a functioning alley that then people had built things on, that I tend to have the same view as Commissioner Burrows, that doesn't meet lack of use because that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't see evidence that this was ever actually an alley. And so we throw around this term a lot, that this alley exists on paper, that I think is a fairly overused term, but actually is real in this specific case because our oldest data with the Sanborn map does not show it, and already starts to show structures that are there. Maybe they're not there anymore, or maybe they are. I had an old garage at one point that probably showed up on a Sanborn map as well. So I think this is one instance where it was an alley that we don't have evidence actually ever existed on anything but paper. And so, don't fall over or anything, but I actually agree with vacating this alley, which probably will never happen again. But staff did a very good job for me in providing enough historical data that this really does perhaps exist only on paper.
I support all of Commissioner Berry's views on this too. So normally I support having alleys in neighborhoods, but it's clear that this has only existed on paper for a long time. And I would like to make a motion if
I may ask
go
a
ahead.
few more questions to staff. First of all, I just want to confirm what we discussed right before the meeting, which is under Utah State Code, in theory, we may not even need to vacate this. Like, we're doing it because it's a formality and it helps with like recording and all of that information. But technically, if a alley has been vacant or unused for more than 50 years, it just automatically disappears under state code, correct?
Well, there's still a process to establish that.
Right.
Right.
But we're effectively establishing that. Okay. And then my second question, if we were to make a recommendation to the city council that they vacate in line with the existing sort of property line or the existing boundary, the existing retaining wall, and the city council were to accept that, would that cause problems for the city?
It creates more work for the city because we have to basically describe that, each one of those, right? I mean, I guess technically we could put that burden on the property owners to do it. And once they give all those to the city, we would review them to make sure that they accurately describe that area so they can be recorded. Okay. But there is more work to do that than simply saying it, adding something to legal description that says and up to including half of the vacated alley. So there's more work.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was researching this, and I want to be sure that I'm understanding, there was a guidance issued by the Utah Property Rights Ombudsman regarding vacation. Apparently, there's a line of Utah Supreme Court precedents that indicate that halfway division is required when there are certain kinds of property interests by the city in the, like it's a distinction between fee simple and fee simple total or something. I don't, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the details, but I want to make sure that we don't end up in a position, because I would make a motion to divide this along the existing retaining wall. But if we were to do that, I really don't want to end up in a situation where the city council accepts our recommendation and then we end up putting the city in court because there's some sort of precedent that we're in violation of.
I think that's something if the council wants to consider, you can make the recommendation. And if the council wants to go down that path, I think that's where we'll have, the attorneys will do a lot more research on making sure that we're doing things that are legally acceptable and right.
Okay.
Just a comment, because when I was reviewing this, if we don't do anything, it's not going to be used as an alley. It's not a public use in any way, shape, or form, and it's just not being used. There's a handful of neighbors that are using it, not the way it was intended originally, but it may never have been used the way it was intended originally. One. Second part of it is, if indeed we do say, yes, it's going to go ahead and be vacated, then I know that there's going to be a whole series of replats, that there's 6,200 square feet of property now that's going to be, what is it, 6 feet wide by the width of the lots, and that's, the property owners are going to have to pay additional property taxes because their property is now grown by that amount. So I see that there's a benefit to the city, for doing that. If we don't do anything, I don't think anybody benefits except the people that are living there now. If indeed we do say, yes, let's go ahead and vacate it, then I think there's some city taxes because of increased property for each one of the property owners. One, and then you still have property owners that are going to be using it in a beneficial way. Right now, it's a no man's land. That's my thinking.
I agree. If I may make a motion, or would you like to?
Do you want to?
Please.
I was going to make the motion that's on the sheet, but I'll go ahead and make the motion for PLN PCM 2025-00219. Based on the information presented in discussion, I move that the commission recommends that the city council adopt this request.
I'll second
that.
Oh my gosh. Who got it? The motion was by Commissioner Christensen, second by
Commissioner Will.
Commissioner Vila. Okay.
If I can make a friendly amendment. All right. So I would propose that we accept the motion, or we accept the recommendation, we recommend that the council adopt this request with the condition that should it be found to be legally feasible, that the vacated alleyway be disposed of along the line of the existing retaining wall rather than down the center line of the street.
Do you accept that?
Quick clarification. If there's one property with retaining wall, all properties have retaining walls. But I think the property line may shift down the alley, right?
Yeah, so some areas have retaining walls, some just have fences.
But all the same line, or no?
It's a little wobbly. There's definitely, like in my backyard, there's a tree right, like my back fence is stepped. And from the measurements I've done, one corner of my lot is a foot shy from what the back corner would be.
So I would say we should probably recommend existing use lines rather than a physical structure, a fence or retaining wall. Just existing lines throughout the vacation. Existing use.
Existing retaining walls and fences. And
what if it's hedges?
Apparent property boundaries?
Could be a barbed wire stake. I don't know. Whatever the owners are currently using, respect those boundaries. That's what I would recommend, but only if you want to add that to your amendment.
I am not going to accept that because I feel like it would cause a lot of work for the city to figure out what probably would be best to have the property owners work out, which I feel in most cases the people are just going to continue to follow those existing areas that are being used, and if there's a need for them to have the lines codified officially, that's something that they can work out.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Christensen and a second by Commissioner Vila with no amendments. Okay, we're going to vote. Commissioner Vila.
Aye.
Commissioner Vila. Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
No.
Commissioner Leverett.
No.
Commissioner Barrett.
Yes.
Commissioner Rosenfield.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows votes no. So that's 3 noes to 5 yeses, but it passes. So we send a positive recommendation for this alley vacation to the City Council. Thank you for your time today. Thank you. Okay, I don't have any more business. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting. We have another meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you.